If you've been feeling like you've been in a bit of a slump lately, your motivation is tanked, things that you wanted to do, like genuine goals you set for yourself, just aren't getting done, then what might be helpful is a mid-year reset. This is a process that I like to do at the end of every quarter so that I can get myself cool, calm, and collected for the quarter ahead so that I can take intentional action on the goals that I'm setting for myself. But how do we actually plan a reset that is going to get us to that state? In this video, we're going to look at the 5-step process that I use every time I'm planning my resets. And if you wanted a little bit of inspiration of what you could include in your reset, at the end we'll also look through what I'm planning from my reset week. To get started though, all we're going to need is something to write on and something to write with. The first step in planning your perfect mid-year reset is considering the purpose behind it. What is it that you actually want to accomplish or do as part of this? I also like to expand this to the mental aspect of resetting, so not just the tasks and actions that I want to do, but also how do I want to feel come the end of the reset process? For me, it's always feeling cool, calm, and collected in pretty much every area of my life, so what can I do to make it so that I am entering the next quarter with that mindset? I'm clear on the actions that I need to take for my goals, I'm feeling like everything's in order for me to be able to accomplish those things, and really just I've set myself up for success. Another thing is that I always want to use it as an intentional time to recover from any symptoms of burnout that might be creeping in, especially if you're a bit of a workaholic like me, or you just find it hard to take a break for yourself. I want to make sure that there's time dedicated to that in my reset as well. We start with purpose first here because it dictates everything else that we're going to put into the reset time. If you want to use your reset as a time to get a head start on some of your goals and projects, then what can you put into the reset to make that a possibility? If you want to use your reset more so as a time to recuperate and rest, then ensuring that that's at the front of your mind when you plan your steps means that you won't add too much to your plate. The purposes that you identify are completely your own. They do not have to be the same as mine, but we're going to use those to select actions for the reset that take us where we want to go. Once you've got your purpose outlined though, our second step is to brainstorm what we're going to do as part of the reset. I usually like to do this one as a mind map because it makes it easier to connect my ideas together, but you could also do this in a simple list format if you want to. Oftentimes I'll actually use a combination of both because they have their own benefits. While a mind map is great for connecting ideas, it can be a little bit harder to use after the fact, and you don't necessarily have the same amount of space to write out long-worded actions. A list, on the other hand, can be great for those long-worded actions, but it doesn't really have the same benefit of being able to connect ideas together. You can have it so that one idea leads on to another, but you don't have the same flexibility in terms of really connecting those things. Whichever system you decide to go with, this is a really great step to get all of those thoughts about your reset out onto paper so we can then start to sort through them and select the things that are actually going to be impactful. We're not doing that at this step though. Right now we are just rewarding the brain for having an idea and putting it down onto the paper. It is okay if you write down things that don't end up being part of your reset. We just want our brain to keep generating ideas for this so that we can do a really thorough job of getting all those thoughts out of our head. Because I have done resetting processes before, this brainstorming doesn't take me too terribly long, but if it is your first time, I encourage you to set yourself a timer so that you don't let this expand out to your entire afternoon or day. Especially when we're trying to get every single thought out of our head onto a page, it can be very easy to let that suck up a lot of time that we want to dedicate to future steps in this planning process. For any kind of mind unwind, brain dump, or brainstorming session, I usually set myself between 10 to 20 minutes, just to make sure that I get a thorough job done, but it also means that with that smaller time frame, I stay on the task at hand and do a better job. If you're finding it hard to figure out what you could put onto this brainstorm, like what actions could I take as part of this reset process, this is where we come back to the purpose. For each of the different categories or areas that you want to reset in, we want to consider these against the purposes that we outlined for the reset process. So for instance, in terms of my reset, I want this to be a time for rest, recuperation. So in terms of mental health as an area, what kind of things can I do to make myself feel that way? What kind of things could I do to ensure that I get to the end of the week refreshed and ready to tackle the new quarter? Another purpose of mine is getting clear on my goals for the next quarter and the actions that I need to take. So part of my reset process is going to be figuring out what those goals and projects are and making action plans so that I can hit the ground ground running and get started on those with ease. Of course, very much depends on the purposes that you have for your reset and the categories you want to reset in, but we just want to use those purposes to guide our brainstorming process. Once our ideas are out of our head and onto paper though, now we have to sort through them. In this third step of planning your perfect mid-year reset, what we're trying to do is group like tasks together and word them as actions. So making sure they start with a doing word or a verb so that we can actually do the thing. If I write down photos, that doesn't really give me a lot of instruction as to what I meant there, whereas if I say declutter photos, then I know what I was intending with that action step. I like to group mine by life area, it just makes more sense for my mind, but you can also group it by where you're going to be doing it. So it could be like in the house, errands outside of the house versus at work. You could also group them by whether you need to do it alone or with somebody else if your resetting process isn't just for you. But by using these different categories, it helps us to organize our list and make sure that we're focusing on all the different areas that we want to hit as part of the reset. The categories I typically like to use are physical health, mental health, home, goals, calendar, journaling, digital spaces, work, personal development, general self-care, social, leisure, and finances. And while you are more than welcome to use those categories, I encourage you to think about the categories that are going to be most applicable for you and your situation, and also what you want to tackle as part of your reset. If you don't feel the need to reset in your financial space, then you don't really need the section of finances. As part of writing out this tidier list though, this is where we start to prune some of the things that don't really need to be part of this reset. They might be something you want to do at some stage. You can add those to a separate kind of someday maybe list if you want to, but maybe they don't need to be part of this particular reset time. Of course, how many things you add to your list very much depends on how much time you're dedicating to your reset. I typically like to dedicate the majority of a week. I like to do these tasks over that span of time to get myself very cool, calm, and collected, but you might just want to have a reset day or a reset afternoon. The amount of time you have will very much dictate the number of things you add to your list. So just because mine looks fairly long does not mean that yours has to be. Once you've got that pared down list though, then it's time to think about how long each of those tasks in theory are going to take you. Now, it can be very difficult to estimate the amount of time things are going to take. I know I'm really bad at doing that time estimation, but a bad estimate is typically better than no estimate at all. Otherwise, I do just let tasks balloon out, take up an entire afternoon when realistically it could have been done in 20 minutes. Because I have so many things that I usually like to tackle as part of my reset, doing this time estimate means that I can actually make time for all of those things, or at least assign time to all of those things. I like to go through my list and write down a time estimate of how long things should or might take for me, just using my best guess. I do find that I am bad in both directions in terms of time estimating. Like some tasks I say like, that'll only take 5 minutes, and then it takes 30, whereas other ones I'm like, oh my gosh, that's gonna take an hour and it takes like 15 minutes. Hopefully it just averages out over the entire of the list, but the reason for this time estimating is so that we can make a schedule for our reset time. As said, I like to do mine across a week, so I like to plot this into a weekly schedule, but if you're just doing an afternoon or a couple of hours, how are you going to assign that time to each of the tasks that you have? This can also be a good reality check moment, like do I actually have enough time for all of the things that I want to get done? So you might find that you also want to prune your list back even further as part of this, just so that then the most important stuff has time in your schedule, and the other ones are more like nice to haves. We'll get them done if we can. Of course, for any of those things that do get pruned, that doesn't mean that you're never going to get around to them. It just means that they might not be part of the dedicated reset time. You can add those to your schedule or calendar for another period that comes after the reset, or before it if you've got time before it. Before I go and place any of the blocks onto this schedule though, I need to go and place the big rocks. These are things that are already on my schedule, they're already happening in this period of time. So these can be things like regular commitments, events, appointments, anything that's already on your schedule that you can't really move. If you're doing this across a week like I am, there might be a few of these, whereas if you're doing your reset in an afternoon and there's already a bunch of stuff going on, we might want to pick a different time to do the reset, especially if you have quite a few things that you want to be doing as part of it. Once the big rocks are in there though, then we can start to place the tasks for the reset. When I'm scheduling my reset tasks, I'm trying to think about how I can make it as easy for myself as possible to get these things done. And one of the tactics that I use for this is task batching. Any tasks that are going to happen in the same kind of context, I'm going to try and put those together, even if they're not related to the same life area. For instance, one of the actions might be scheduling exercise time for the quarter ahead, whereas another task, in not the physical health category, could be scheduling deep work time for the things that I want to do in terms of work projects. Both of those are scheduling tasks though. They're going to require my calendar and sitting at my computer. So I'm going to plan to just do those tasks together. This helps me save on the startup cost anytime we do task switching. If I'm working in my calendar already, might as well just do all of the calendar related stuff at the one time. Another thing that I try to be very mindful of though is my energy cycles, both across a day and across a week. For my daily energy cycles, this is typically higher energy in the morning, a bit of an energy slump in the afternoon, and then a bit more energy in the evening. Whereas across a week, Monday and Tuesday are very high energy, great for brain work and deep thinking, whereas Thursday, that is energy slump central. That is where all of my motivation goes to requiescat in pace, and I just don't get anything done in a timely manner. In assigning my tasks across the reset period, I want to make sure I'm leaning into those cycles. So putting brain work at the times where my mental energy is at its highest, and tasks that require my physical energy at points where that is at its highest. Or at least where my mental energy is at its lowest, because a lot of my reset tasks require mental energy more than physical energy. Where you place your tasks very much depends on what tasks you have, how many you have, your natural cycles and tendencies. But by going into the reset process having this schedule for ourselves, it means we're more likely to get all of the things we want to done. Because it's often easier to work with an example, I figured I'd show you what my plans for reset week are. After doing those 5 previous steps of just like brainstorming, getting thoughts out of my head, organizing them, seeing what I have time for, this is what I have now. The actual schedule gets put into my digital calendar, but all of the tasks get put into my regular planner. You can see that the simplified sections I went with were physical health, mental health, personal, which is kind of like self-care tasks, goals, planning, development, home, digital, work, finances, social, and leisure. And I also included a little meal log for myself here. When it comes to the reset that I like to do, really the purpose is to get very clear about what I want to do in the next quarter, make sure that I have processes in order that are going to support the goals that I have for myself, make sure that my physical and digital spaces feel refreshed, they're tidied up, and I have dedicated time to recuperate my energy. I also do all of these things across an entire week, not just one day or an afternoon. So if you're using this as inspiration, do make sure to take into account how much time you're dedicating to your reset. In terms of my physical health though, we have planning 4 lunches and 4 breakfasts for quarter 3. I've been aiming to do meal prep this year and it's going well so far, but I'm getting a little bit repetitive in some of the things I'm making, so I want to find some new options. We also then have doing my meal prep for week 1 in terms of breakfast and lunch, and I also want to find myself a stretching routine, because one of my goals I already know for quarter 3 is going to be about building flexibility. In terms of mental health, I want to do a really thorough brain dump, get everything out of my head and onto paper, either so I can action those tasks, or I can save that information in a place that's going to be relevant to it. And I also want to prioritize better sleep, because that's one of the real mental care tasks that I can do throughout reset week. I find towards the end of the quarter, because I start to feel the kind of like time pressure coming up to the end of those 3 months, I start to let my good habits on sleep slip. So reset week effectively acts as a recommitment to making sure I'm getting good sleep. In terms of personal, this is really personal care tasks. So that's things like taking an everything shower, dyeing my hair, and also doing a dry brush. I haven't done one of those thoroughly before, so I thought it would be kind of cool to try. Reset week can also be a good opportunity to try new things, so I'm looking forward to that. In terms of goals, this is very much about reflecting on the quarter gone and planning for the quarter ahead. So I have reflect, brainstorm goals for the next quarter, and then planning my goals and projects for that upcoming quarter. The planning category here is getting everything in my planning and productivity system up to date. This includes planning and scheduling an ideal week for quarter 3, because I want to change some things up with my schedule, jumping into my digital calendar and scheduling recurring and irregular events, making sure that that's all updated with any plans that I have for the upcoming quarter, and also making sure that my journals get populated. So the start of my new journal, the upcoming month, and the first week of quarter 3. For personal development, I want to make a quarter 3 reading plan, in particular in the realm of self-help and picking out books that I might want to tackle. And I also want to choose some self-improvement habits that I want to focus on. When it comes to the home tasks, I do like to do a fairly thorough job typically, but I know I have some decluttering projects that I want to work on in quarter 3, so I'm kind of putting them off until then, instead of putting them in reset week this time. The tasks we have here though are laundering my sheets, because it always feels fresh and clean to get into a freshly made bed, doing a full house tidy, clearing out our clutter hotspots, and then making sure to dispose of anything that comes out of those spots, whether it's like a donation or just rubbish collection type thing. I want to reorganize our fridge and freezer, and I was also thinking about getting some clutter hotspot capture spaces, so effectively buckets that I can capture clutter in, so that they don't spread out to every single available surface. In terms of my digital space, this is really about getting rid of any disorganization or clutter and also backing up files. As part of this, I also need to do an inbox zero, which is in dire need of doing. Email and Jess don't really get along very well. Of course, just because I'm taking a week to do this reset doesn't mean that life stops, so we also have work to be done. I have the minimum viable work that needs to be done. I need to make sure I'm scheduling time for that. I also want to go through any of my quarter 3 work projects and prioritize which ones I want to work on, and then update my workspace in Notion to make sure that everything is scheduled out for the quarter. When it comes to finances, I want to make sure that my finance tracker is completely up to date. I've logged all of my tax information from the last quarter, and I've also got a plan for our quarter 2 finance review. I don't do that until the first week of the next quarter, just to make sure that everything is captured. So while we won't actually be doing the finance meeting, I do need to make sure I have a plan for the finance meeting. Because one of the ways that I like to recuperate is through social connection. We also have a social section here. So not only is this about getting in and doing social tasks during reset week, for that I have 3 in particular, plus a date night with my partner, but I also want to make sure that I'm planning any fun social events that we could have in quarter 3 too. A lot of the time, when you're an adult, you need to make these plans in advance because people's schedules just do not line up. As for leisure though, the only thing I've noted is that I want to make sure I have leisure time. I haven't specified what that is because I kind of want to just follow my joy when it comes to getting into reset week. If I want a game, I'll do that. If I want to do some reading, I'll do that instead. Now as we have our task list and our schedule though, I guess step 6 is just to get excited for the reset process. I love the mid-year reset. It always feels like a really clean, fresh slate coming into the 3rd quarter of the year. So I would love to know what is going to be on your reset checklist. What are you hoping to do as part of your reset? Are you going to be taking a full week like I am, or just an afternoon? Let me know in the comments below, but if you wanted to see an example of what my reset looks like in action, then this video is the next one to check out. In that one, I take you through the entire week and everything that I accomplished, how I was resetting every area of my life so I could start the new quarter cool, calm, and collected. So click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.